Doctors of Reddit, what's the best asking for a friend story you've heard? Not mine, but one of the older pharmacists I work with went out to help this 20-ish girl with some med questions. She then asked him about condoms and said, "If you were to do me, what condom would you use?" Yeah, he just walked away. One girl was interested in laxatives for a friend. She tried to learn everything about the dose, where what to buy, how to drink. She was brought in a week later with complete intestinal apnea. She tried to lose weight so much and drank 2 or 3 tablets at a time. Lady walks in and goes, "So if you cheated and got pregnant, but then had sex with your husband, would the baby become his?" It took everything in me not to laugh. ER doc. Had a guy who just got out of jail a few days earlier came in with his GF who had signed in for an STD check. Walk in to meet them and he says casually, "Is it possible to get gonorrhea in your throat?" At that moment I knew he had gonorrhea in his throat. My father is a doctor and he got a call once in the middle of the night from his call shared doctor's patient. The man asked what to do about a bump on his friend's arm that he scratched and something came out. He mentioned it was leaking a little oil now. It was as it. He scratched a pimple. Woke the whole family up at 3 AM because he had to page my dad over as it. Do you sleep with hot male patients? Asking for a friend. I asked my doctor about AA for a friend of mine. Really? Years later the doctor still asks me how I'm doing with my sobriety. I've stopped trying to convince him I really was asking for a friend. Wife's dad is a urologist. When we first started dating, a friend of mine wanted her to ask if any of the de-enlargement pills were legit and actually worked. She went with the asking for a friend approach and he immediately assumed she was talking about me. Thanks babe. Divorced women cougars like to explain muscle strains as 6 injuries to get a rise out of docs. Best way to deal is to stay monotone and not react. Patient describes proximal adductor muscle pain in hip flexion during recreational activity. Rated 7/10. Pain is now present during ambulation. If you don't react, they move along. Doesn't take long in the office to have seen and or heard everything. I'm not interested that you are recently divorced. Started working out and discovered Tinder. Good on you. But it takes more to get a rise out of me. One colleague in training had a professional cuddler with a similar injury. Doc was very conservative, possibly on the sheltered side, and in front of 2 of his superiors during the case. And she was not shy. I would add she was not visually what I assume most would hope for in a professional cuddler either. That one I enjoyed, on account of him, not her. Not a doctor but pharmacist. Someone called the pharmacy one day. A young guy. I picked up. "Excuse me, how much does Viagra cost? Is there anything cheaper? I have someone that needs it." I explain everything and suddenly, "Will it work if I take it with alcohol?" The guy began asking for someone else. At the end was for him and was asking just because he wanted his little one to work while drunk. General practitioner here. One of my non-medical friends asks me that his friend wants to know a good home remedy for an STD. I told him a tablespoon of powdered detergent mixed in 1 glass of water should work. Next thing I know he's in my kitchen stirring a glass. Studies have been done about the effects of THC on glaucoma. When I worked for a glaucoma specialist, we had a hippie type person come in with their family member for a new patient eval and ask the doctor to sign paperwork okaying a medical marijuana script for the patient's glaucoma. Problem was the patient was totally fine. Didn't find any signs of the disease and his eye pressure was within normal limits. And the doctor did not appreciate having someone try to trick him. There is one dream where in my dream, I'm Spider-Man, but I'm losing my powers. I'm climbing a wall but I keep falling. In my dream. Actually, it's not even my dream. It's a friend of mine's dream. Not a doctor but public health worker. Kinda NSFW. Had an older man come into our clinic asking for a specific type of STD check. Guy's ex-wife was going around telling rumors that he was having sex with his goats, so was wanting to know if there was a way we could do a STD test that could prove if he hadn't had sex with any goats. Through this whole conversation, he just abruptly asks, "So if someone was having sex with a goat, what STDs could they get?" That dude is totally ducking his goats. Edit. Typo. Eye doctor here. Finally closed our offices to all but emergency care. Last year or so I had a staff member ask me for a friend if she got shot in the eye with cum and is now getting mild discharge. Is that okay? I looked at her eye and saw discharge, went to the cabinet, gave a bottle of antibiotic to her for her friend and then went back to my patients. 2 days later I look at her and say, your eye is looking much better today. She says thanks. The discharge stopped a half day after using the drops. Yes, hi, this is Dr. Capital X. I need to call in a prescription for hydroxychloroquine. Do you have any in stock? Asking for a friend. I'm directly related to a nurse. More than once I've approached her with a question for a friend that actually was for a friend. Not a doctor. Heard this one from my cousin. A guy comes in and asks if it's possible to get a girl pregnant with someone else's sperm if guy A had sex with guy B before banging C female. Wish I knew the full story. Not a doctor, but I was an intern. I was in the OPD and this man from a different province came in and told me his friend has injected petroleum jelly in their member years ago and that now it's getting painful. Why yay. He came back the next day and showed his lumpy member. Edit. For clarification, this is done to increase girth of the D. When the patient woke up, his skeleton was missing, and the doctor was never heard from again. Another family medicine doc called an ER doc yesterday on the cell phone asking what to do when you get soap in your eyes. Choose wisely, folks. Not a doctor, but was mistaken for one by a drunk dude at a costume party once. Okay, twice. Sent him to sober up the first time. Comes back 5 minutes later with no recollection of our first conversation and asks me for painkillers and at which dose they kill you. I gave him the number for the suicide prevention hotline on a napkin and told him that they can help with the issue. He happily staggered away and I haven't heard from him since. Either he got help or he didn't, but either way, it was a weird experience. Middle-aged women ordering a shitload of comfort food at our KFC drive-thru and then adding, sometimes multiple times, that it's not just for her. I'm a veterinarian. When taking a dog temperature rectally, an owner going, mummy doesn't like it either. I briefly dated a doctor and she told me a few hilarious stories. 1. If my friend masturbated with someone else's vibrator, will she get an STD? 2. Can wearing a butt plug all day give you diarrhea? 3. If you have an ulcer and swallow a guy's cum, can you get pregnant? When I was in med school, one of my classmates, who was always a bit unfocused, asked a psychiatry professor during a lecture if there was any research about cannabis and other drugs going on at our university, in case that group needed another PhD student. This classmate didn't graduate, as far as I know. I met him a while ago, and he looked like a stereotypical hippie, looked past me, not at me, and didn't recognize me even though we were in the same case group a bunch of times. Seems like he found his own way of researching drugs. So not me, but a person I saw. So the patient, sick as heck, staggers to the doctor and at the absolute loudest possible voice she said, "Are you single?" Betty wants to know. Betty was her childhood pet cow. The doctor calmly says, "I'm sorry, but I am not interested." We were all busting out laughing and I barely could breathe. I later asked the doctor how he kept a straight face. He said, "Laughing on the inside. It's a lot like crying on the inside." That is now the hospital I frequently visit. One of my besties called me late at night after his day party. He said someone who was staying the night wanted to have a sex with his GF. They were drunk and a little uncoordinated, and somehow the frenulum, the little string thingy at the tip of the D, ripped, and it won't stop bleeding. I gave his friend some general advice on stopping the bleeding and recommended a trip to the ER. The next day he asked me if I had any recommendations for urologists for his friend, because he needs minor surgery on his PP. I told him to cut the bullet, and in response he sent me a pic of his injured D. So, long story short, his wank got a remodeling and he is still with this V-dentist sporting woman. I haven't come across any stupid questions, sadly, so can someone ask me something stupid so I feel part of this thread? Not a doctor, but hope this gains traction. Well, one time had a guy say what happens when you stick a tapeworm up your D, and then he immediately followed with I'm asking for a friend. My thing was he was squirming a lot, so I had already assumed he was lying, so I told him he should go to the hospital to get it checked out, but I don't know if he did. It was very strange. Asking for my puppy. I took a class in medical parasitology. The professor, a PhD in parasitology, once had a very concerned neighbor bring him dog poop that had human pinworms in it. He suggested the neighbor take his puppy to the veterinarian for some albendazole and assured him that the infection would resolve. Pinworms are still a common and very treatable infection, even among first world children, but not puppies. Not necessarily asking for a friend, but my mom worked for a doctor in my hometown. He was a foreigner. I needed to see him one day and he begins telling me that not him, but his foreign French friends think Americans are stupid, lazy, fat etc, but he was saying it with a lot of umph behind it, like he was disgusted. I asked in a pharmacy if the hair lice shampoo was suitable for pubic lice. My cousin is always telling this story to my sister when she's drunk. The girl who came in asking if her friend washes his condoms after sex and reuses them, would they still be able to work? After a week, the same girl comes in to ask my cousin to tell her boyfriend that the kid was his. Apparently this friend she was asking about was her boyfriend's close friend who she cheated with, and he got her pregnant after reusing condoms more than a few times to save money. Won't be saving money for condoms anymore, that's for sure. Till that asking for a friend doesn't mean you want to make friends. I was part of a tattoo removal study. I asked the DR what was the worst tattoo she ever saw. She said that there were some really bad ones, but the one that stuck in her head was the burly biker that got a no regrets tramp stamp in flamboyant calligraphy. She said she almost asked if it was consensual. Not an actual answer, but this thread gave me an answer about the question how fast corona will spread. Hint, fast. In June of last year, a man who came into me about an ingrown toenail asked me if, hypothetical, you put a Skittle up the hole of your D, will it dissolve over time if it won't come back out? Asking for a friend. He says it doesn't hurt, it's just kind of uncomfortable when he gets a boner. Not a doctor, but a patient. It was my first gyno appointment and the doctor was convinced that I wasn't a virgin, even added suuri. I just didn't try to correct him. Still a virgin. This person had legit medical questions but was too afraid to ask, so he created a Ask Reddit post hoping someone posted a similar question. Can putting a catfish in your rectum cause internal bleeding? Asking for a friend. And I didn't believe him until his friend came in and had 7 scars on his face just from trying to catch a knife while laying down. The reason I didn't believe my patient was asking for a friend was because he came into the hospital with an injury from falling off the roof while riding a skateboard inside a shopping cart. Can my friend get a STD from licking a hooker's nipples? As a celiac, very few things have been sold out and it's been great. I just really hope they don't forget to order our stuff as they scramble to restock everything else. Someone in family gave her herself severe diabetes and essentially eating herself to death and is addicted to pills. I had her sign a form so I could speak with them and told them about how many pills she's accumulated due to them constantly writing prescriptions. They agreed to not give her any pain pills and unfortunately the virus postponed putting her into a professional care place. One of my grandparents was an ER nurse for like 30 years. She once had a young girl, like 18 or 19, come in asking for a friend of hers if she could still get pregnant if he used a condom but left the condom inside her afterwards. I asked for a friend about hormone therapy. She had just come out to me as trans and I wanted direct information in order to help her as best as I could. I did not expect my doctor to dig out my old blood work and tell me that my transition from female to male would be easier than most due to the already high amounts of testosterone in my body. She asks me every once in a while if I'm ready to start treatment. I don't know if it's a joke or if she legitimately thinks I'm trans, as I've explained why I've asked in depth multiple times. Not a doctor, but my dad asked this to my doctor and it was embarrassing. My mom was in the middle of an anxiety attack, so she took one of my take as needed anxiety pills, and she got extremely nauseous. So my dad asked my doctor about and he just gave the clearest I am going to answer that question but pretend I didn't hear it yeah I've ever heard. I've begun to realize all walks of life are on Reddit. I tried once, then started crying. Because I don't have any friends. Not a doctor, but one of the friends. My friend walks into the nurse's office asking if size matters when it comes to the purchasing of condoms. The nurse sat there in awe looking at my friend. Needless to say, no matter how big your dong is, condom size doesn't matter all that much. This was in 7th grade. The doctors are all busy RN.